You might have heard about those CIA-funded LSD mind control experiments in Montreal in the 50s. You might not know about another brainwashing experiment during that same era. It went on well into the 70s and was one psychiatrist's pet project. He thought he had found a novel way of curing the criminally insane. Tonight, CBC Vancouver's Wayne Williams goes back to the asylum where it all happened with one of the guinea pigs, Steve Smith. Our documentary also includes some shocking footage taken 20 years ago of the same experiment at the same institution several years after Steve Smith was released.
Almost 30 years later, I'm still haunted by 8 months in that hospital. I'll never forget what happened in that hospital.
We try very hard to make good use of the skills that patients have as therapists for each other.
Well, what's this group for, anyways?
This group is for you to talk, to get you to change your behavior.
There were times that I thought they were going to kill me, for sure. It was torture. It was forced.
These are the hallways Steve Smith won't ever forget. It's a place he was locked up with little hope of ever leaving until he was forced to take the cure for madness.
Because it was such an important violation of ethical code of conduct in human experimentation.
It was almost 30 years before Smith could return to the scene, where he says he was brutalized and forcibly injected with psychedelic drugs, all part of the cure. He came back to see if he could make any sense of how, as a troubled teen, he was locked in here. Even though his life has turned out all right, his past haunts him. He currently lives in Vancouver with his wife Zinoko, where they live a West Coast lifestyle. Together, they operate a thriving plexiglass business. His detour to the insane asylum began when he was just another barefoot hippie living on the streets of Yorkville in Toronto during the 1960s.
Just hanging out, playing guitar, making music. There was a lot of interest in music then. Everybody wanted to be a musician.
Morning's here.
What were you like?
About the same. Just modernized a little. Yeah, I had long hair, down to about here. Beads around my neck, mostly barefoot. Yeah.
Music, drugs, and petty crimes, and he was treated for depression. Then on a winter day in 1968, with some LSD in his pocket, he began hitchhiking to Vancouver. He wouldn't get far.
It was cold. It was end of March, so up northern Ontario was extremely cold. We almost froze to death. And stole a car. We didn't intend to keep the car. We wanted to hitchhike. We were just going to leave the car in a gas station, in a closed gas station, pulled in, turned the car off, and police pulled in right behind us. They knew clearly that this was a stolen car. I had 2 hits of acid, LSD, and being the young, impulsive, silly kid I was, I popped it, hide the evidence, get rid of it, so I ate it.
God, I gotta get out of here.
Big mistake. LSD in the 60s, this is pretty powerful stuff.
I don't want any help from nobody. Nobody!
Within half an hour, I was just... walls were melting, massive hallucinations.
Not knowing the effects of LSD, the judge sent Smith to a hospital for observation. But after an apparent attempt at suicide, he was moved for his own protection.
They were sending me to Penetanguishene, Hospital for the Criminally Insane. My jaw dropped, and I was absolutely terrified.
Steve Smith's bad trip had just begun. He was transferred here to the Mental Health Center at Penetanguishene, Ontario. He was about to become an unwilling guinea pig in one of the most radical experiments in Canadian psychiatric history. Doctors here were trying to reconstruct the personalities of some of Canada's most dangerous and insane criminals: the rapists, the sexual sadists, and the child killers.
Well, my first intentions were to rape her, but when I started to When I grabbed hold of her, the sexual motives just disappeared. I just flipped right out and started strangling her, and I pounded her head against the stairs a number of times.
How old was she?
She was 10.
So car thief Steve Smith found himself locked away with Canada's worst in the Oak Ridge division of the hospital. Most had no hope of ever getting out. That is until a young psychiatrist arrived on the scene, promising a cure.
Intensive programs are being carried on.
Dr. Elliot Barker, shown here in a 1971 CTV documentary, believed mental illness was a failure to communicate. He wanted to destroy his patients' defenses to bring out their inner madness. Barker wanted Steve Smith to begin his treatment with a trip to the sunroom.
Dr. Barker came in. I was on the floor. He told me that I was a very slick psychopath and that I needed treatment and that he wanted to put me into a program in the sunroom. I didn't really know what he meant by that, but the word sunroom sounded an awful lot better than the room that I was in. He gave me some possibility, some hope that I might possibly get out if I went along with his program.
Dr. Jim Kennedy says medical treatment requires informed consent. He's the head of pharmacology at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, and he chairs the hospital's Committee on Ethics and Human Experimentation.
So it was neither consent, meaning that it was a reasonable thing to agree to, nor was it informed. And it's really a shame that it appears that these physicians would have been ill-informed or thoughtless around that particular issue.
We think the patients have really very great advantages as therapists for each other. They all know that they're sick, each of them.
Barker wanted therapy to be relentless, so he locked his patients in groups where they confronted one another for days at a time, often without sleep.
You like your rotten personality and the negative effects you have on others?
No. Well, what have I done since I come here?
You've been very negative in here and trying to shut us down and intimidate us by your size and...
I don't think so at all.
Well, I think
the insane criminals became their own therapists and were punished if they refused.
My understanding of a psychopath is they don't understand anything about someone else's feelings. They're the least qualified to be making any decisions about treatment for anyone else, no doubt about it.
You know full well what you've been doing for
The patients were given the power to prescribe drugs for one another, drugs that would create turmoil to provoke their inner madness.
Yeah, you're just defensive, throwing things back in her face. I think maybe an Amatol might help you.
I'm in favor of the Amatol.
Yeah, I would have to agree. It seems to be the right time.
We do attempt to use other drugs which bring out more clearly the illness that lies often concealed beneath the surface.
I don't believe that Barker ever made any direct decision about what drugs I should receive when. That was made by patients and then followed through by staff or by Barker.
Their drugstore included sodium amytal, better known as truth serum, to get them talking, methadone or speed to prevent sleep, LSD, an hallucinogen, and the one Smith grew to fear, scopolamine, a drug that causes delirium and paranoia.
I guess I can start with my feelings. I have a lot of hate in me, and I don't know why, you know.
They had visitors come from all over the world to see this supposedly successful, tremendously successful program for psychopaths.
Dr. Marnie Rice is the director of research at the Mental Health Center. With complete access to inmates' histories at Oak Ridge, she was able to fully evaluate the program.
They'd spend 24 hours a day locked up with one another, so that, you know, eating, sleeping, everything, even their toileting, was all done in a group.
He wants to kill people.
It was impossible to escape from one another in those situations. So it was coercive, and this coercion in such a total environment, there'd be no distraction, nothing to distract the person from really examining his own personality.
I was frightened to death. No one wanted to listen to what I had to say. I was just being told what to do, what I was going to do, where I was going to go. What the program was about was behavior modification. It wasn't about curing mental illness. It was about behavior modification, brainwashing.
It's no doubt true that many of the techniques that they use in brainwashing are effective, and that we are using somewhat similar techniques. The group pressures, the use of drugs, the use of sleep deprivation, in some cases fasting. These things help to bring about a change in one's personality structure, which is what we're trying to do with these character disorders.